Welcome to this NOMAS Projects event. We're glad you can join us this afternoon. My name is Cully. I'm an artist based in Dundee. I'm one of the people behind NOMAS Projects along with Owen Daly. And we are delighted to be working with Charlotte Maishman, who is a Dundee-based artist, having graduated from Duncan of Jordanstone College of Art and Design in 2022. She was the recipient of the NOMAS Graduate Prize, which has culminated in the current exhibition that she has with us called Beneath the Glaze. I first met Charlotte while I was on the Artist in Residence programme at DJCAD, Duncan Johnston College of Art and Design, and helping with the professional practice programme. My next encounter was when she was working for a carpenter who was doing building work for us, and she had taken on work as an apprentice joiner while she was a student. And as well as that, while she was a student, she was learning to weld and sculpt porcelain, and all those newfound skills featured in her installations in the following years, which we will see in her presentation. Charlotte came to the fine arts with a background in creative digital media. At her degree show in 2022, she received the Royal Scottish Academy Barnes Graham Travel Award with her collaboration partner Gwendolina Rota. The duo recently spent a few weeks in Italy to produce work for the award, which will be featured in the RSA in 2024. Charlotte also started work as a technician at the Art College in Dundee, splitting her time between the Contemporary Art Woodwork Department and the Audio Visual Department. And then as a personal creative endeavour, she also began to explore porcelain in more detail by pursuing traditional making in throwing at Dundee Ceramics Workshop. Beneath the Glaze is an exhibition featuring wheel-thrown porcelain, supported on steel plinths and suspended with steel cables. The installation incorporates symbolic imagery and metaphor, inviting the viewer to consider hidden depths and shades, as well as repetition that conceals untold details. Charlotte describes porcelain as fragile yet incredibly strong, a complex contradiction beyond initial recognition, much like ourselves. As we endure this journey, we are all tentative, crumbling clay, made of flesh and bone, built of positives, negatives, and many unknowns, all deserving exploration beyond first appearance. And it was that statement when I read at her degree show that really intrigued me, as well as seeing the work, because NOMAS Projects has always been had a focus and consideration of the marginal, and that which is often unseen. And so that statement about things that are built of positive, negatives, and many unknowns, all deserving exploration beyond first appearance, was one of the things that attracted us to the work of Charlotte. So today we'll hear more about this exploration as Charlotte shares the ideas behind her work. And as always, there'll be time for questions. You can put them in the chat during the talk, or we can open up for discussion at the end. So if you can please join me in giving Charlotte a very warm welcome.
Thanks, Kelly. All right, I'm just going to share my screen. Yeah, you've kind of said initially, but yeah, so Beneath the Glaze is a collection of wheel-thrown porcelain supported on steel plinths and suspended with steel cables. The installation incorporates symbolic imagery, metaphor, inviting the viewer to consider hidden depths and shades of grey beneath the glaze. So I'm going to kind of talk about my journey from the start and then circle back to how I've got here. So that's the project just as it is now in the 5 windows. But this really kind of started with me as I grew up in Devon. I was living aboard a sailing boat. So I grew up quite remotely, literally in the middle of a river. And I was like canoeing to school, hoisted up the mast and fixing cables and lights and ropes. So it felt natural for me to be suspended and just working with a contrast of materials, whether it was sails or metal shrouds. And the minimalism of this sailing vessel in nature is quite poetic. And I think I always had that little streak in me. But art wasn't really on my radar. I didn't know much about contemporary art, especially, and I was actually doing quite well in film and photography at school. So I went to Plymouth College of Art and studied creative digital media. And while I was there, I filmed the painting, drawing, and printmaking courses, and it was amazing to see the creativity and lack of restraint that they had as students, and it kind of always stuck in my psyche. So when I then moved to Scotland, meeting my partner, I decided to take the plunge and go into the art foundation at DJCAD. So Kevin Henderson was a big influence here. He kind of would give you 2-week projects where you had to be pushed outside the box and explore how to make with minimal materials. You had to stand by your conviction, draw every day, and just kind of change your thinking and question the world. And I then found that I was actually kind of suited to fine art rather than graphics or film, which was my initial thinking that I'd end up in. So this piece is a steel cube which has suspended in it laser cut lettering, which make up the alphabet, and then a branding iron with LGBTQIAAP plus letters. So I'm actually a member, so there's no hatred here. It's more a question as to when the letters stop. When do we need the labels and when do we not? I was quite interested in woke culture and cancel culture and how we need boxes in order to function as a society, but how they can also be quite restrictive. I think that sometimes with cancel culture, you can stop asking questions, and a lot of people feel unsafe to ask questions. So yeah, it was kind of a slightly comical, morbid way of looking at that. But I got my aesthetics kind of coming together here, where I was interested in the box, in the cube, minimalist lines and metalwork. So through second year and third year, I started to work with Jason Shearer, who's the metalwork technician, and create installations where people could enter them. So this box, people could actually walk inside of the cube and feel quite isolated. And then on top, there was these sharp, spiky glass shards, which were smelted in the glass kiln, which was my first experience of the ceramics department at all. So I was quite interested in this idea of melting and changing a material like glass, and I found out about like ceramics. So knowing that I wouldn't have as much control with glass as it would just kind of melt with gravity, I went into ceramics and spoke to Sean Kingsley, who's in there, and started to play with porcelain, which I could then mold and make by hand building and extruding, but I wasn't throwing at this point. So during these couple of years, second and third year, I was looking as well at architects, stage designers, and artists that worked with universal symbolism, such as Olaf Ellison, who used the big sun, which connected to things like meditation, climate change, just seemed to connect on every level. Set designers such as Devlin, who used simplicity of long curtains with projection to create a sense of space, a sense of an atmosphere. or Kengokuma with the V&A, a sea cliff, which suited the minimalist modern design, but also suited nature. So the poetics of space was really key for that, and understanding kind of my background, the interior world of how we all think and how we gather experiences in different spaces. So yeah, porcelain became my main medium to complement the metal. It was contrasting literally, as it was so ice white against the cold grey. And I, at the time, thought of it as just delicate and something I could mold. But I really didn't realize how obsessed I'd become with it over time, because it was a complete contradiction to everything I had learned about culturally about it. So it's sort of as opulent and fragile and used for tea sets, but it's actually also used for gun emplacements, and it's in engineering, so it's quite interesting. So my starting point were these small, delicate models of a kind of soul in space. I then became more illustrative and had metal plinths suspending metal waves, which I had handmade with my fingers to project light onto. So here's a small video of one of these installations. Oh, sorry. So yeah, at this point of time, I got into projection mapping. I was using a lot of my film and photography kind of skill set to try and display items onto porcelain as a surface. And I didn't, as I said, think of it as more than that kind of canvas that I could mold and shape. But the idea of space and expression and connecting with a wider audience was still there. I was thinking about water as a universal entity, and I use this now with my collaborative partner Gwen. So that track has still carried on. It's just kind of on a tangent. But in terms of Nomas and my porcelain, it went separately from this. So during uni, we obviously had COVID, and during the lockdown, I needed work, and I found work with a very talented joiner, Phil Messiter, who's also a dear friend, and I learned a lot from him, from building very quickly to measuring and cutting very accurately, otherwise he'd be very mad. And yeah, I learned how to build more traditional things in kitchens, or I think Cully's roof is just there as well. So it became an influence on my artwork. I started to think about a universal symbol of a home, needing shelter, and also it was the analogy for a space, a vessel, and it became a body of a building. So for my degree show, I created a extruded porcelain building, which was bolted and suspended in a 2.5 square meter cube, metal cube. And the porcelain weighed 70 kilograms, the weight of an average human body. And it had cartilage made from 3D printed, like little bits of rubber in between each of the dwangs, so that it wouldn't crack and jar, and little bits of wood to join each piece. So the making process really illuminated my my thinking about porcelain and understanding it, I had to create a manger so that the 350 pieces would be supported and not warp, because it has memory. It literally would warp under if it was too cold, if it was too warm, if it was too wet, if it was too dry. If I pulled it out of the extruder at the wrong angle, it was so sensitive, so I had to nurture it. I've got a small video here, but I'll skip through. So from wedging it, where you have to slam wedge it and leave it to rest. Here's the extruder. And then cutting it while it's leather hard so that I could try and shape it, but even then it's still warping. So you have to try and help it into submission. And then I put it in for first firing at 800 degrees. So I learned quite quickly from cutting it that it would warp. So I needed to fire it once so that I could then sand it and drill it. And this would allow me to have straighter cuts, which meant I could build the structure with a little bit more control. As there's 20% shrinkage, it's really quite difficult to predict exactly the measurement it's going to be, but it meant I had a bit more control in that final firing. Okay, so the cube here, it kind of harked back to that experience of second year with that box that I had people walk into, that body suspended in space, a body of a building suspended in space. It felt like that kind of reflective returning of an idea, and then having the metal support the porcelain as well. It made it initially look like it would be fragile and weak and could shatter. But actually, I think the metal it would melt easier and warp easier than the porcelain. I wouldn't want to stand under that house. It could have killed somebody if it fell. So, so also in this presentation, I had photography works, and these were based on an experience over lockdown where I went to Strathmartin Hospital, which is now shut down. And it was for people with mental health issues, but it was also for people that were kind of discarded and thought of as less than in some way. They weren't cared for by their family. They might have just been kind of cast away for some reason and just forgotten there. So it was quite a sad place. And I went there with my friend and artist, Callum McFadden, and asked if he would mind if I photographed him to get some high contrast imagery. So Callum felt reflective of my process with porcelain. We discussed a lot about various personal experiences and the way that he looked. He's so strong. He was often subject to a misconception, and felt like a kind of yin and yang between us in that experience. So having him paired with the building, it felt very fitting. These are shadow works on silk. that were in the entrance of the Cooper Gallery. So you'd walk in, see the silks, see the photography, and then it would open up into the building in the cube. And this is a poem, a bit of writing that I made during that time. So, porcelain records every moment of thinking, every change in thought, made by binding the soft flesh of penitence with the brittle bones of kale and clay. Through construction it holds trace, influenced by all its experiences. As the extruder bursts the clay into form, many scar and warp. Those with too much trauma, over time, bruise, break. Those that survive move in tension, from foundation through fire and on, to collate bolt after bolt into a rhythmical mass of sonorous plains, now a husk where we are all found. Come closer to know the cuts, curled edges, hidden traces beneath the glaze. Search beyond bold builds, see more than the nicks on each knuckle. Find that all our bones are brittle, hold weight until they crack. So after the degree show, I took the building out of the white walls, and I was exploring the body in space and porcelain in space. And I exhibited in the Botanic Gardens by taking the house apart and seeing it amongst the trees, again suspended by the steel. And I was also contacted by dancer Jenny Fraser, who she studies at the Space Dundee, and she's a dancer and choreographer, and she wanted a set designer, an artist, to design a set for her dance piece that was based on her niece Addie, who suffers from Batten's disease, which is a degenerative disease, which means that she'll eventually lose her sight and sound. And yes, it's a horrific disease, which is very rare. So Jenny connected to the house, and I suggested making the silk works, the photography, in 2 6-meter silks, and then the house suspended on 2 steel bars. So this was a brilliant privilege, and also a very good test for me to work quite quickly, as we had to get it on and off the stage in 5 minutes, which with nearly, I think it was about 50 kilograms of porcelain, was a good challenge, but it went fine. So at this point, I'd also been applying for the Dundee Ceramics internship, and I was successful. And I had agreed with Gwen and Rachel, fellow graduates, that I would have a space in WASPs with them, and we would be able to studio share. So I was right next to Dundee Ceramics Workshop, and the internship meant I had access to use the wheels and the kiln. And it also meant that I would meet some amazing people, all obsessed with clay. And one person in particular, George Buchan, is an incredible ceramicist. He works with porcelain and is very generous. He taught me how to throw, which I'd never done up until last September. And he gave me lots of apparatuses and tips and tricks. And all he needed in return was me to come and volunteer in his Sunday classes. So yeah, he's great. So at this point, I started drawing out my ideas from all of this previous work in terms of the painting, the black and white contrast. which was playing off of the idea of black and white thinking and negative and positive, just the yin and yangs within the world and everything I was questioning. So it kind of came into these slightly Japanese inspired designs, which I then this is my process. But yeah, I then had to figure out what kind of glazes I would use to make these mark making these black and white kind of marks. So you'll see some of those glaze tests in a minute. But in terms of the throwing of porcelain here, I learned quite quickly that you needed to let it rest after you wedge it. You need a good base because it's like throwing with ice cream. If you add too much water, it'll have a tantrum and just flop. So sometimes when I think this was meant to be a moon jar, and it turned into a bowl. So it's definitely, they all have unique little intricacies and stories to them. So at this point, I was looking at using, I think I tried oxides first, but the iron, even though it was black iron oxide, the redness of the iron would come through when I glazed the porcelain. So I ended up with a speedball black, which kind of bled. I also wanted to put the pots through the laser cutter and try mark making by sanding, laser cutting, and then drawing and scoring into it, and then adding paint and then taking away. So there was a lot of kind of resilience that each pot had to go through in order to be kind of sanded back and then reworked. And I would add words to it and then paint it, sand it. So each one had all of these intricate lines, kind of like fingerprints, which would show more and more as I sanded it and reapplied. So this film is showing in the first window at NOMAS, so that it's an introduction to the three windows, and then the final window, which has an empathy symbol, which is extruded, kind of going back to that building, the technique that was used in the building. And I was quite keen on having them as vessels, not with a handle. I wanted it to be seen as one body of clay and not something that could be used as an apparatus to drink from. I wanted it to be a body. So that's why none of them have handles, and they've all been drilled and then suspended. So here is just a photo to show the lines after I've polished and trimmed them. It's really, really smooth to touch, but that'll pick up so much paint and all of these intricacies, which is where the black really, really shines through. This was me playing with just presentation, working out how the metal would contrast before I added the paint. And Kelly, you've said that, so that's okay. And then here are the 5 windows, and this is the 5th window with the empathy symbol. So it's not very well known actually, but it's actually 2 arrows that are kind of crossing over sides. And I wanted more the idea that if somebody was more interested in looking into the work and they asked any questions, for me to be able to say, like, it's not about empathy is a difficult thing because it's not about you actually maybe having gone through that the experience in likeness. It's more if you felt dismissed, or if you felt a sadness or feeling scared, that you can understand something by talking about it and opening up, rather than having that barrier there. So this kind of is a culmination of everything over about 6 years of questions, which has come together in NOMAS. I think that's it. And thank you to everybody that's helped me over the last few years. I couldn't have done it without you. So, any questions?
Thank you, Charlotte. It might be worth going back to the quote that I had said in the introduction, in light of now what you've shared. One back.
That one.
Yeah, that one there. Yeah. Thank you, Charlotte. What struck me about that phrase, or that paragraph there, was in your house piece, because I remember when I first saw it and not realizing that it was made of porcelain, because it looked so, well, it was so solid. You know, it was skeletal, but it still looked and felt heavy. I actually thought it was steel on the outside and then steel, but that had been maybe spray painted white. I didn't realize it was porcelain. So just that idea of looking, beyond first appearance, which I think is the case with art generally, that it often needs a period of focus and concentration, to get beyond its initial surface level. That was a great presentation, Charlotte. I loved just how you've taken us through that journey, especially from your upbringing, having been, like in terms of working on sails and rigging and suspension, that's kind of continued into your practice as well. But also the way things are documented. Like, I don't know if that comes from having done the course in digital media, the films, do you do all that documentation yourself?
Yeah, I'm naturally quite obsessed with it. I play on Photoshop for fun. I'm a bit geeky with it, so I quite like just kind of manipulating photos again and again. And it's more actually knowing when to stop and allow it to be messy. So the pictures of it in my studio, that was quite difficult for me because I'm used to having such clean backgrounds. I need to show that there's some soul here. So yeah, everything's black and white with me. It's a nightmare.
The documentation was great though. Do you think that's helped, if you're, I suppose even just on a practical level, if you were applying for funding or opportunities where you've got such good documented, because it looks really, really professional. Is it just this is the aesthetic I like and I'm doing it for that, or are you aware of that the better documentation helps with opportunities maybe?
Yeah, no, I am quite I'm quite aware of documentation, especially because I think I learned quite early on that if you don't have something documented and then it plays into something later on, you'll regret it. And it also helped with going back to old ideas. If you've got like something solid, you can revive it. And I mean that some of those second year things I hadn't looked at in years, and then I was like, oh, that's actually come from there. And I've ended up using works that I dismissed in applications. And I think I did mention, I think the husk of the female form, I actually had that in one of my recent applications because it felt really relevant. So it's definitely an important thing to do, even if you're not liking something at that point. Document it anyway with fairly good lighting. And it's good if you're inside an institution like DJCAD, you can just come and get a camera. So you don't even need to worry about a phone or anything, you know.
I'm just checking the chat to see if there's any questions. None yet, but if anyone has a question, you can unmute as well if you want to just ask that way, if you feel confident enough to do that. But if not, put it in the chat and I'll take a note.
Hello there.
Hi, Carol.
Hi. I just wanted to ask a question about, when you work with wood and when you work with steel, and when you work with a variety of different materials, they sometimes there's a reciprocal relationship that they begin to communicate with you. I don't know. Did you feel that there was something that you learned about that as you were building these things?
I think it's probably the key, actually. Like with steel, you less tax is better because it'll warp and you can't undo it, and you have to hammer it to high heaven. And then with wood, you've got a lot more movement, and I mean you can do a hell of a lot more with wood than anything else. And I think in terms of doing the joinery, I think even it was like looking at kind of the grain of the actual wood, and actually knowing like, okay, this still has it's got this memory in a different kind of way. You know, you need to go with it one way, not the other, but it has a certain amount of elasticity, which is better than, say, porcelain. So building with porcelain, for example, the dwangs had to be really short because when I got to 70 centimeters, it was banana. So the roof struts of the, not even struts, I don't know what they are, peaks, out of practice. But the roof parts were longer. So I think I had about 10 of them and 6 survived, and the other 4 looked ridiculous, so I couldn't put them on. So definitely responding to the material and letting it direct you a bit is important, for sure.
No, I was sort of thinking more with my question. I don't know if I got it across, but I found sometimes then working with, like you said, working with steel, you can sometimes feel that you might have to be a bit more aggressive with it because it has certain implicit properties. And then sometimes with wood, you have to be more patient, more caring, and it's sometimes certain materials are selected because they have these attributes, but then you find that they teach you certain things, That's what I find when I make stuff. Sometimes I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think I just agree with you.
Hello, I've got a quick question. It's about the thoughts again behind your work. There's a lot of thought going into it. Do you work with readings as well? Do you look at other people's thoughts, or is it really coming from the tactile side of things?
definitely, I look a lot at Edmund de Waal. So his book, The White Road, was a big influence. I think that he mentions how porcelain's kind of been like created in Asia, in Africa, and all of these different areas of the world. So it felt like it was a lot more cross-cultural than maybe a lot of people would assume. Like, I mean, a lot of people think of Asia, and it's actually been discovered even in Kingsbridge, which was like a town over from where I was born. And yeah, it's surprising. It's a really good book. So his writings, his poetry, and the way he installs porcelain is a big influence. It's kind of each of his pots are kind of slightly misshapen, and then it's presented in a space and rearranged, responding to the space, which I really find a big influence. Because in art school, I think that there's a certain element of you make a work and then you put it in a space and it's an afterthought. So I really like when people pay attention to the space, and architects, designers, and de Waal really do that very well. So yeah, and writings, I think Bachelard, the poetics of space, the way he talks about the interior mind and how we reflect and absorb and put back memory into everywhere we experience. I think they're the two main focuses.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks.
Congratulations as well.
Thanks.
Glenda's had to leave. She says she's an oil painter, but that was a real an eye-opener. Loved it. I think just showing the video of the process as well. I mean, I think there are other ceramicists on here, but I found that really, really helpful. Just to see that process as well. So thanks for showing those. And that's what's showing in window 1 on the screen, and we're also showing it. There's a projection space that we have now, NOMAS, in Yemen Shore in Dundee, so it's projecting up onto the wall, and that I think is running through till the 6th of June. So if you're in Dundee after 10 p.m, once the street lights come on, it's powered by the street lights basically. You can see the making of that as well. So yeah, I really appreciated that, Charlotte, as well. Just seeing that process.
I just want to say, well, congratulations. It's a really beautiful exhibition, and you're speaking about it was just so generous to be able to see the journey of getting here. And I wondered if you'd speak a little bit more. Obviously, your ideas about vessels has shifted, or maybe not shifted, but just how they are, how you're thinking about them has kind of changed and altered along the way. And just wondered if you'd elaborate a bit more, or how this body of work maybe is informing the next thing to come, and if vessel, whether it be home or body or clay form, where that might be headed for you.
Yeah, I think I've it's interesting because I only started thinking about the boat recently when I read some of Flusser's philosophy and that talk of a dissipation of experience. So I was kind of thinking like these ideas like of anything that kind of holds anything, whether it's light or space or us to enter. It feels like kind of everything is a vessel in a sense. And I think I'm just not, I wanted the pottery to be more literal in that way now, because I knew that would relate to a lot of people. So like my partner's parents came and saw it and they said, oh, we like this, we could see it in a shop. And because they're not that interested in art in a wider sense, but they could appreciate what a pot was in its, just for its aesthetics. So I think moving forward, I'm going to keep pushing that idea and seeing how I can incorporate light back into it. And I think with Gwen, my collaborative partner, actually working to expand on that idea of like a more traditional vessel, but breaking the rules of it in some way. Yeah, I to be honest, it's open-ended. I'm looking at, it's quite nice to be free without an idea for a minute, in a literal sense, but I think there'll always be a vessel of some kind. There'll always be something to hold light or dark or anything like that. So I don't know if that answers your question, because I'm a bit open with it as well.
No, absolutely. I've been my own work is really informed by like Le Guin's carrier bag theory of fiction, which is about kind of talks about vessel and bag, and carrying and that sort of thing. So I really enjoy that, and seeing it the way in which you were explaining it, to see the iterations that have come through the different materials and forms. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
One of the encouraging things is having something like Dundee Ceramic Workshop, you know, in Dundee, and you know, because a lot of your work would need a workshop or a space like that, or you know, whether it's welding or steel work and so on. You know, to have those facilities at the college is really significant. You know, you obviously took. Well, it looks to me like you took real advantage of the workshops while you were there, and I just wonder how, you know, obviously you've got the ceramic workshop, so you're learning to throw, and it's interesting how you've made pots, but then kind of subverted that as well. You know, so they're all you know, you put a hole in it, and then it's suspended, so it becomes less of a commercial object and more within the context of an art piece, as it were, you know, like an installation. Because I don't know if there's I suppose I do know this because you've got jobs, so it allows you to do that, because you're doing your job that allows you to be almost purely expressive in your creation without having to worry about the commercial side of it. But I don't know if that's the case or not. Because it was great to see how you took your house initially in your degree show, and then it had two other iterations. You know, it was part of a performance piece, and it was part of the Botanic Gardens exhibition. I don't know if that's a question, actually, Charlotte.
Yeah, I think I know that, like, in terms of the, like, affording to do the work. Actually, when I applied for Dundee Ceramics internship, I was in a really panicked state at that point, because I was trying to nail down some work, and I was doing some work for installations at Cooper Gallery, just like helping out. But it was I was trying to think about how I could afford to do it, because the porcelain house was so much porcelain and it was so much time. So I'm gonna need to shift into smaller installations, even to like progress in a kind of sketchbook way or any way. So applying for Dundee Ceramics made me think, okay, well, if I can work on something that could become commercial. So the pottery did actually have that side to it. I know that learning this craft and actually starting to learn it and knowing that I need to get better at it to the point I could sell work, that would really help support me. So that definitely was in the back of my head. And then because I got the jobs at the uni, it then meant that I could be a little bit braver with it and know that I was investing money that I wouldn't get back instantly into it, and put holes in pots that normally I wouldn't want a hole in. So yeah, I think that actually money is a really big factor in knowing that if you don't have the work, it's really difficult to be brave with it, to be honest. And yeah, I've definitely not earned anything more than like £100. So it's definitely a love, and if I didn't love making, I couldn't justify putting so much into it.
Yeah. Owen.
Does the mic work? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, thank you, Charlotte. It was a superb talk. I love the integration of the film documentation as well. I think that's the first time that's been done for us in Nomas. My question is related to the different media that you use. So you've got ceramics, you've got film, you've got photography, and then there's this sort of stage work as well. And I know that's not necessarily a medium in itself, but in the way that it's got a different dynamic, I think, for you. But do you see them all equal in your own mind? Do you have time where you give more one to another, like more emphasis for one or another, or do you try and sort of give them all equal love as children, if you like?
Oh, that's good. I think I appreciate each one for what it is in itself. Yeah, it's a good question. I think each one's got a quality that I'm proud of. That each one's got something I would learn from as well. There's some that feel very personal, very raw. Others feel a lot more separated and creative and fun. Yeah, it's all kind of different. And I think maybe because I've had the iterations from the house, I think the house is probably still the highlight for me, because I know how much blood, sweat and tears it took to make it and think about it and to problem solve it. It was an absolute nightmare. So I think that's definitely up there. But even then, like this work and the windows, it's like a really exciting new beginning. And I think being brave enough to put out pots that they're still a bit heavy, they're not perfect by any means. It feels like a new beginning, and that's quite exciting. And yeah, they're all different.
Thank you. And how do you negotiate it now, obviously, with the work as a technician at the art college and working in the ceramics workshop and so on? Do you still have the luxury of space, internally, emotionally, intellectually, for yourself?
I think, to be honest, I'm excited to have a little bit of a break and have a little bit of a holiday, just to sleep a little bit. Maybe would be good. But no, I really am enjoying. I'm enjoying throwing for its meditative feeling. To be honest, it's a bit more calm. So with the community there as well, it feels like it ticks a fun box as well as an art. It's also like gaining, obviously, my art practice, but it's enjoyable. And then the tech work's great as well. So I'm always involved in something creative at uni, and it's good.
It's very common, isn't it, to artists where you have other work and you're trying to balance time in the studio, physical time, but also headspace time, as well as have another, because I know you've been really busy, Charlotte. You run up to this as well. We're just kind of, well, it says at 5 o'clock. So if anyone has a question, last question, just want to give the opportunity to ask. Matthew, were you kind of looking for a question there, Matthew, were you?
I was going to ask a question earlier on, but I think Charlotte partly answered it. And it was partly to say that I really love the idea of with the house and it being an artwork that might have different iterations and take completely different forms. And I was going to ask whether you had any plans for that particular piece or other pieces that might have different manifestations again in future, or is that it?
I think that the house, I've kept it all. It's all protected and bagged up. It's ready it's kind of sleeping at the moment, but I feel like
Might
it,
come back.
it will definitely come out again in some form. But sometimes it feels like I meet the right person at the right time, and then it happens. And that happened with Jen, and even with the botanics. It just felt right. So I'm not in any rush to put it out until it feels right, but
Yeah,
keep it safe.
I really like the idea that it wasn't wedded to that initial form, but it had that sort of flexibility, and I really enjoyed that.
Thanks.
Can I add that it reminded me very much of a series that Matthew did of squares. He did 10 squares, was it? These are flat paintings, but he played, they weren't very painterly, they were very much like abstract. They had words and symbols. One of the symbols was a house. And this is 11 years ago, but the interesting thing was it was square and it was this house symbol, one of which was a house sort of taken apart. At that time, my understanding of modern art was as seasoned as it is now, having been married to him for a while. But yeah, I was wondering about the cube, because you've used the cube. What drew you to that? Because it was obviously something on your mind. You had the square. And
I think I mean, we always talk about the white walls and the white boxes, and it is such a Western thing as well. I think at the time I might have had a couple of lectures, and one of them was, I can't remember his name, but he had gone to he stayed with Native Americans, and they were talking about the interruption to their circle, the way that the circle is so inherent in their culture, and how we put the square onto them, and creating these big boxes. And it just suddenly kind of drew attention in my head to just every aspect of where I literally was as well. Definitely not in the same realm. What happened to them was brutal. But coming from the boat, which was an odd shape, and everything was kind of an odd form, but it felt very natural. There was something free about it. Then staying in a student dorm, which was a box, and working in a box, and then displaying work in a box, going to a gallery space, it was just everything about the world just seemed like white walls and kind of regiment. And then obviously it was quite apparent as well within the social climate of art school that there were certain do's and don'ts in with like kind of woke culture. And I think it just started to make lots of connections to me with symbols and questions I had about the world and where I fitted and where other people fit. And yeah, there's something very rigid about the cube. So
thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Matthew and Yuna. Hannah asked a good question, obviously, just in terms of what you were reading, just around your ideas and, just what you've explained there, that makes sense. I know we've also talked about, one of the things that I really liked was this idea of that you kind of compare porcelain to the human body. It's kind of made of crumbling clay as well. And I just wonder if, there's any reading or thinking around that, in terms of, I suppose, what it means to be human. Because I know there is thinking in that, not least as we make outward appearance. That's why one of the things I was really interested in your work, that we so quickly make assumptions on outward appearance. And yet, humanity is just, full of, as you say, positives and negatives, but just complexities. And I just wondered if there's anything you're reading around that, maybe philosophically, anthropologically.
Yeah, I think I was quite obsessed with the material factor, and then it was a lot of more discussions around me. But I think it's more observing what was going on in our culture through experience and talking to people, to be quite honest. And I know that there are some, like, I think I was doing like equality and diversity training, things like that. I was looking into like all of the quizzes that were going on. And like there was a book actually that I think you showed me that I was researching. I can't remember the name of it. It had all of those advertisements. Do you remember? It had all of the...
Oh, the book I showed you?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, that was really good.
I can't remember. Recently?
Yeah, it was fairly recently. It kind of highlighted everything really nicely. But no, I think... can't really think it off the top of my head, but I did a hell of a lot of research initially in those first few years, and I think it became more and more material based and poetic based, and then it was kind of building off lots of things that were going on around me with various different people's identities with culture, and I was looking at lots of things that are related to pride and race, and there's so much going on in the school all the time. It felt like I was kind of absorbing all these things from different angles rather than reading them in any said book, which maybe I should have, to be honest. But
no, it's interesting you say that, because it seems like it was a response, an experiential response, and then your output then, just from what you said there, was a poetic response as well. And I think that really comes across. Even the piece that you had in second year, because remember you talking about that now, the red cube with the letters, and then the LGBT, and then all the letters after it, and you kind of making something about that, but from someone within that within that framing, as it were, not questioning it even from within it. So it seems like it was experiential rather than reading.
Yeah, I think so. Especially with that, I felt like it was okay for me to show that one as an example, because my partner, I've been with her 10 years, but it was interesting how everyone introduced themselves as their sexuality, and then maybe their race, and people kind of naturally box themselves into these categories. And it just kind of interested me that the narrowness of the way people would even introduce themselves in the end, and how there was this kind of need to have an identity and a need to cement an identity onto some kind of subculture, which is really important, but it became such a fixed thing that they couldn't walk outside of that, and they couldn't see outside of that. And I think that there's a danger in some of woke culture and cancel culture where you can actually isolate and become really narrow-minded in your own way, because you're trying to find identity so much that you're becoming defensive of anything that could seem a threat when it's just the other. And that was just kind of apparent everywhere. And yeah, I mean, I experienced a lot, especially being like, I went for a job interview at the Discovery ship to do some labouring there. And I went on and did my interview. Well, I tried to, and the guy just looked me up and down and went, "Oh, my daughter didn't like it," and I got turned away. And I just thought, oh, that's so annoying. I didn't even get a chance to say. But then I kind of thought to myself, if I had said to him, "Give me a chance," he might have actually given me a shot, and probably felt embarrassed by writing me off so quickly. But I was so shocked and annoyed that I just went off and was angry about it, and it didn't help anyone then. So I think learning not to be bitter. It's been a learning curve for my art, and trying to talk about it rather than and getting it out in some way than bottling it up in some manner. So
well, I've appreciated, Charlotte, getting to know you over this year and the times that we've met and had numerous deep conversations. So I appreciate your thoughtfulness as well. And again, just for your presentation today, which was brilliant. A few people are kind of leaving now, so I'm just going to hand over to Owen just to let us know what's happening coming up next in the next month. And I think everyone's already on the mailing list, but if anyone is not on the NOMAS mailing list, you could put your name in the chat and I'll add you to it. But I'll hand over to you, Owen. I've made you co-host, so you should be able to screen share.
So Charlotte, immense thanks for your generosity.
Thank you both for everything. Yeah, it's been really, really great working with both of you, and thank you so much for your support. It means the world. So thanks.
Likewise. Here's Charlotte's work, and she's shown it already, but these are some install shots. And for those of you who are not able to be in Dundee, so we have the monitor in the left window and the pieces on the right and the ceramic pieces there. When I look at these, I was so struck by the shadows. It's fascinated to discover the theatre set aspect of your work as well, both in the research and in practice. When you were working in the space, I've filmed 2 films in that space and I love it. But here, the shadows and the theme of your work in terms of our fragility of life and temporality made me think of Edmund de Waal, of course. And also a bit morbidly, the kind of ossuary, like a place for bones. And that was without even knowing anything that was there. And in the shadow, in terms of time passing, when I was looking at the works, it's just got a beautiful rhythm to it. And so when we see it all together, it's just such a delicate show. And the whole notion of the body that you brought through made me think of high school as well. So, and of Shakespeare. And let's talk of graves, of worms, of epitaph. Now, I got a bit morbid. Make dust our paper, with rainy eyes write sorrow in the bosom of the earth. And especially that small model of the barren earth, which serves as paste and cover to our bones. And just the notion of clay there as well. And of course, the kind of biblical narrative of being formed from the dust and from dust to return. And then how you use the windows and the hair with the amber eyes. There's such a poignant story, all through the lens of porcelain. And then your use of the vitrines, you can see the objects, but we can't touch them. We frame things suspending, tantalizing them through distance. And I felt that that was really embodied in your show. And it's just so nice to have it. Of course, big thanks again to Charlotte for showing her work. And yes, we look forward to you joining us again at our next talk.